So hello again. This webinar is we're talking about how micromobility service provider can partner with public transit. It is hosted by Autonomy, and I am joined by three experts from different organizations, and we'll get to the introductions in just a minute. But maybe before we'll do that, let me talk a little bit about why integrating shared mobility or micromobility with public transit is important to myself, Sandra Phillips. If you don't know me, I know most people in the chat anyway, but if you don't know me, I run an organization called Movmi, and we specialized in anything shared mobility, whether that is, car share, micromobility, or increasingly integrating shared mobility with public transport. So I know that today is also the launch of the white paper by Autonomy that all of you were part of. And it really focuses on three areas when you talk about integration. The physical integration, and I think that's key. We always think of integration, or at least a lot of people think of integration on a software level, which is important. But because shared mobility and public transit all move around in the physical space, I think the first level is to get it connected somehow in the physical space. The second one is what I mentioned, comes to mind most of the time, which is the software integration, right? The digital integration, so people don't have to download multiple apps. The challenge, I think, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, is on the data side. And how do you now share customer data across, and who has the record of truth? And how do you make sure that that is all seamless? And then I think the last one, and I will personally say we've been involved in a number of integrations. One of the most challenging ones to discuss is the commercial integration. So pricing bundles, or not even pricing bundles, like if you're in a trip planning application, who gets the ride and when do they get the ride? And then if you want to take it a step further, it's like, what does the bundle look like? Who gets how much? If you're doing, a one pass that you can take as many rides as you possibly want, how does that look like? Who is dispersing the money between the different partners, but also who does the customer service? So there's a lot of pieces that need to align for integrations. And as I said, we've worked, probably the proudest project, I will say, is here in Vancouver with the public transit agency called TransLink. It's a regional agency. They provide buses, SkyTrains, even sea buses, so ferries. 2 car share providers. If you don't know, Vancouver is the largest car sharing city in North America still, even though Cardigo left a long time ago. And the bike share operator. And the first integration we did was actually just through the fare card, and it just gave access. And it was a very manual, laborious effort in the back end to then, at the end of the month, deal with all the customer invoices. And then obviously, it also tells you that it was a pilot. We're in the second phase where this is going to be a lot bigger. And I can't say too much. We're in the process of RFP, so everybody has to be silent. So ask me in a couple of months how that's going. Now, with that all said, I wasn't a contributor of the white paper, but you guys all were part of it. So maybe we'll do a quick round of introduction and maybe talk a little bit about the work you're doing around those three areas, whether it's physical integration, digital integration, or this commercial, like pricing, customer service, whatever else it may be. And Cornelius, you're like on the top left for me, so why don't we start with you?
All right, thanks, Sandra, and hello, everyone. My name is Cornelius Kiermasch, and I run the bike sharing and the car sharing system of Deutsche Bahn in Germany with the the largest train company or mobility provider in Germany. And like regarding bike sharing, it's also like the second biggest or largest bike sharing system. We run, for example, for the city of Hamburg, the city of Stuttgart, in the whole region, a bike sharing system. And apart from like, this is part of like the micromobility. And then on the other hand, I'm responsible for Flingster, which is the largest car sharing network. It's a station-based car sharing network existing out of almost 40 regional car sharing partners in Germany, and building like a huge network of 4,500 cars in over 400 cities. I run these two shared mobility options for customers, Deutsche Bahn. And beforehand, also with Sandra, we used to work back in the days for Car2Go. I was working on the headquarters level, you were working on North America. So this is something we have in common. And as I'm responsible, because our focus is today more on the micromobility, so I will today focus more on bike sharing and our bike sharing system, Call a Bike, with over 80 cities and 13,000 bikes that we run. And regarding physical integration is, well, we have assets. It's a bike at the end of the day. And then we have stations in many of the cities located at the train stations or bus stations. The second one was like we were working on digital integration is, as we, of course, we have an app, our own Call a Bike app or Stadtrat Hamburg app. And then we are working also on the integration into third parties, into MaaS apps. The easy part is with a deep link, and the toughest part is regarding having, integrated the registration, the payment, and the billing included. Like this is like really the tough part when you run a bike sharing system and want to be integrated in the different MaaS platforms in the market, because all of them have a different kind of standard, because there is not a standard yet. And maybe this is just a few words about myself and about the shared mobility business I run.
And I have to say, when I left Car2Go, I did a tour in Europe, and one of the very early bike shares that I tried on that tour in Europe was Call a Bike, which I don't know, can you still call? Because it used to be that you actually call. Can you still do that? Or
yeah,
is it all
that's a good question, actually. Like back in the days, like it's already like Flingster and Call a Bike is 20 years old. So when we talk about new mobility, the Deutsche Bahn runs it since 20 years, or operated it since 20 years. And it started as the brand name Call a Bike. You had to call back in the days when there were no apps, and then to open the bike. So it was kind of an innovator here in Germany. It was Call a Bike, and then we actually also, when I joined the company 3 years ago, we were also asked ourselves, hey, shall we keep the brand name Call a Bike, because it's not calling anymore? But we decided, because in the German market, Call a Bike is already kind of a brand. So people do not connect it with a call. So that's why we left it like it is. And yeah.
And it gives you a chance to talk about your long history. So I think it's pretty awesome that you kept it.
Good point, Sandra. Yeah.
So with that said, maybe Nicholas, I know you're standing in for Maxim, who is delayed in the airport somewhere, or on a flight somewhere. So Nicholas, you're dialing in from Dott. Maybe you can say a few words about what you're doing, and also how you're kind of working on those 3 levels of integration.
Sure. So my name is Nicholas Gers. I'm Vice President Operation for Dott. So we're a European micromobility operator, currently operating e-scooters and e-bikes in Europe. We have a fleet of 50,000 vehicles, and we are in around 40 cities in Europe. And so our mission is to free cities with clean rides for everyone. So we truly want to be inclusive and be as integrated as possible with public transport. This is really one of the core pillars. And so what we do on the physical world is that we are working with municipalities on parking to truly make multimodality happen at a physical level, with our scooter being physically where they need to be to integrate with public transport. We are working on the digital world by being integrated into the public transport app. So I'm sitting here in Paris, so the app from RATP is a good example. And commercially, obviously, working out deals for with public transport authorities. I agree with you that this is something that is still not mainstream, and a lot of things still need to figure out in terms of data, in terms of commercial aspects. But we're moving on, and I think there is willingness on both sides. So I'm very confident it will very heavily materialize in the coming years.
I was going to say, I definitely think Paris is, as a whole, one of the areas, right, that has been leading the charge. I think the project that are on the Ile-de-France, also around, integration, there's so many different flavors that have been experimented with, which I find very interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out in the long term. So I think what I'm trying to say, you're very fortunate. I know I said before I'm jealous here in Paris just for personal reasons, but I also think you're very fortunate. You're kind of sitting in a hot spot, really, of all forms of new mobility, and kind of, I know that we're looking at it from North America often on like, how has Paris done it, and what has worked and what hasn't worked. So nice to have you on the call. Nice that you're standing in. Thank you very much. And with that, Gaetano, I'll send the questions over to Italy, and I'm really curious to hear what Vaimo is doing.
Okay, thank you, Sandra, and hello, everybody. I'm Gaetano Sciacovelli, and I'm the sales manager here in Vaimo. Vaimo is, let me say, a technology provider. We offer micromobility solutions for, let me say, end-to-end, from charging station, e-bikes, and software. Vaimo is part of a bigger family, which is called Angel Group, which is, let me say, multinational company with pretty old history, and historically we develop every kind of technologies for transportation, from railways to aviation, aerospace. And then, let me say, in the last years we have seen more and more micromobility becoming part of public transport. So let me say, we decided to also invest in this field and develop our own solution. So what we have done for, let me say, integrating, so how we see this integration with public transport. So we took the challenge of developing the system, as I was saying, end-to-end, even if this requires a lot of different companies, so from data, software, mechanic, electronics, in order to offer a technology really flexible to be adapted to different cities and operators' needs. So let me see, on a physical aspects, maybe offering a solution for docket scheme or for free-floating scheme. In terms of software, by having, of course, a fully open and API-based system. We try to allowing as fast as possible integration with the third-party application or mobility as a service system. And on, let me see, a commercial aspect, of course, we are, being the technology provider, we, let me say, do not decide, let me say, the commercial aspect between operators, but of course we try with our technology with simplifying this cooperation between operators by allowing an open and easy to use technologies in this respect.
Yes, which I as you said, right, it's the glue that holds it all together at the end of the day. When you start integrating, it's like really the different technology. And it's always amazing to me how much technology there actually is, because there's the technology that holds it all together, but then underneath every single operator has their own, and it's actually quite a challenge and a feat really to make it work seamlessly and beyond, as Nicola said, that just the pure backlink deep link solutions. So with kind of the introductions and everybody knowing who is on the call now out of the way, I did want to say two things. In the chat, I see that people are still telling us where they're dialing in from. So thank you. That's really great to hear or to see for us as presenters. But I also want to point out that I will be taking questions from the chat. So please add them. I will feed them in as we go along. We have a couple that we have prepared, or I have prepared, and then we'll pick up on some other ones. But before we do that, the other thing I want to do, we have 3 polls, and the very first one is actually a very simple one, I think, anyway. So I'm going to kick this off. We would love to know how often you, and that's really the audience, is using public transport. Whether that's bus, trains, subway, trams to commute, especially now that we're moving back into a more normal, I hate to use this normal word because I think nothing is normal anymore, but like into more of a how it may have looked before the pandemic with a few tweaks. So I'm really curious to see what people are doing there. So we'll keep it open for maybe a couple, another half minute or so, just to see, because I think there's still a few people that haven't voted. And while we're waiting for that, Nicolas, I have a question for you. Specifically because we're talking about commuting and we're polling people on commuting. I know that micromobility, the majority of trips are actually for leisure. There is a new study, and if you haven't seen it, I will post the link in the chat later, by University of St. Gallen and BCG. And they did, at least to my knowledge, the largest consumer survey. The polls came back that 42% of the people use micromobility for leisure. So how does Dott envision us or the industry as a whole to make micromobility more attractive also for commuting purposes, specifically for that first and last mile? What does it need, or what is required to move maybe not people away from leisure? That's great. You guys can, people should use it for leisure as well. But what do we need to do to move the needle and get people also to use it for commuting purposes?
Thanks for the question. Just a quick comment before on the actual statistic. This is an average, and I believe there is a very high dispersion on the average depending on the type of cities, right? You have cities where you have a lot of tourists, so probably there is 2 axes, right? There is free floating and there is restrictive parking, and then there is another axis which is low tourism and high tourism. And so the 42% is the average. What I can comment from Paris, as I'm physically here, is that actually the share of commuting has drastically improved, because today the peak hour for micromobility, so for Dott, is really between 9 and 10 a.m. and between 5 and 7 p.m. But this is recent, right? This is really post-COVID. So that's probably something that has changed. And I think to answer the question on how to push again those boundaries, how to continuously improve the commuting on with micromobility, there is really 2 things that we can do. The very first thing is to ensure that we are building habits with the positioning of our vehicles. So we need to be a reliable service, means that anytime you are at a public transport station or place, you have a vehicle that is charged, that is maintained, and that is available to customers. So reliability is the first thing, and that we do through operation and through leveraging the data that we have. The second thing is physical parking. And again, speaking from Paris, where we have 2,500 micromobility spots, which has completely changed the way people are using our service, because they cannot do it from point A to point B. They can do it from station A to station B, which means that structurally it's multimodal. They need to walk to go there and then to offload, which has eliminated the very small trips that used to take place, because you're not going to have a 2-minute trip if you need to walk 3 minutes to the station. So, which is encouraging even more commuting. So I think, to summarize, 2 things: physical positioning. We are a physical business. We need to be reliable and at the point of multimodality. And second, infrastructure to specifically for the positioning, with having a place in the public space which is set and respected.
And I think that's this goes back to the earlier comment, right? The first piece is like the vehicles move physically in the space, so they also need to somehow be co-located in the physical space. Now, I'm actually gonna ask Cornelius and Gaetano to comment on this as well, but I did want to share, and I don't know if people actually can see the closed poll, because it's the first time for me using the platform. So I'm just gonna say, of the people that have dialed in, over half use public transit for commuting all the time, which is actually great, especially, and I will say, coming back out of this pandemic. I know that ridership has dropped for everybody across the world, right? At some point, I think 70%. It has come back. I know that in Vancouver, we're not quite back to pre-COVID transit ridership. And I think the thought right now is that those 20% I think that we're still missing is just the change in employee behavior more than actually, a loss. But with that said, I'm gonna throw the second poll into which is about what's the biggest hurdle for you to combine micromobility with public transit, because that ties into what Nicholas just said. What are the reasons that what do we need actually to shift? But as I said, I'd really love to hear Cornelius and Gaetano's your point of view on what does it take for us to move the needle and get people to combine micromobility with public transit for commuting.
All right, then I will jump first on the answer on that question. So as we run our bike sharing system in different cities, like as mentioned, like over 80 cities, but like 6 the major cities in Germany. And depending on the city, we have also a different share, like it's 30% to 50% of commuters that use our bikes to commute to work back and forth. And the biggest share we have, I would say it's in Hamburg or Stuttgart, because for like in Hamburg, one of the success factors is that we have on the one hand 30 minutes for free for everyone, every citizen in Hamburg that is registered for our bike sharing system. Stadtrat Hamburg in Hamburg can use it like 30 minutes for free for every ride. And then there are also 2 different tariffs then. There's a standard tariff, which is then counts by the minute, and there's a special price when you are when you have a public transport a monthly or a year pass. So this is one of the key success factors we have in Hamburg. And in Stuttgart, there's only a special included tariff for this monthly and annual public transportation customer like plan, and where it's like it's 30 minutes or 15 minutes for the pedelec or for the electric bikes, 30 minutes for general bikes like pedal bikes. So meaning like when you include it, when you make micromobility cheaper, then you get also more commuters using it then. And maybe another thing is availability at the main station or at the train stations where where in the morning the people arrive after took the regional train. They need, of course, availability, and we need to make sure that in the morning, that once they arrive, we have enough bikes there. But then the tougher part is, how do the bikes go back? Because the people then spread out like everywhere, and then we have for this we have also service level agreements, meaning like for our top priority stations, this is where we relocate bikes, in the morning and back and forth. And maybe like the third success factor is, apart from availability of the bikes, to have like when you have a station-based model, like in Hamburg, where you can drop it take it from the one station, then leave it at the other station. People are lazy; they do not want to walk that long. So in general, like it's 300 meters is what they accept. 500 is getting then like, so meaning like you need a huge network where we have over 300 in Hamburg, 250 stations in Stuttgart. As more stations you have, as higher the utilization as well for the bikes and the usage.
Which is so interesting, because you now went into like, there's the let's co-locate and let's bundle, but now what you also just brought up is like the whole operational piece that comes with like the integration and the fact that you now need to really manage the ebb and flow of the devices that do the first and last mile specifically. And we work with Shift, which is an operator essentially for bike share in North America, and one of the bike share that they're dealing with is Toronto Bike Share, which is one of the largest in North America after New York. And they have these valet stations set up in certain places where, they have a lot of flow basically during certain periods of time, and the station cannot even handle it. And as you say, people are lazy, so they're not going to find another station. They're just going to leave the bike and deal with whatever consequence, which causes headaches on both sides. So what they're doing is they have like a valet sitting there and then just shuffling it right back to the right station, because they know it's easier to deal that way. So anyway, I think it's really interesting that we sometimes forget that there's operational spillover from these integrations that we also have to think about, right? So Gaetano, maybe your thoughts. I also know that you're really like looking at the e-bikes specifically and how you can integrate that. So I'm just curious to know what you have seen.
Yeah, I mean, let me say, as a manufacturer, I share the ideas of Cornelius and Nicholas. I think that availability is really important, because if I need to go to work in the morning, I need to find the bike in the station. I need to find the bike that bring me to work. And the same, I need to find the bike when I, for example, jump out from the bus or from a train. So availability, I think, is the key. Capillarity is also really important, because again, people do not want to walk that much, so you really need to create a network, or stations or vehicles around the city. So the work of relocating bikes is really important to have bikes in the peak hours in the right spots. And I also think that something that can help is, also having bikes maybe in, commercial areas or industrial areas. So not really only the city center, but also, spread a little bit more in the city. I know that this is a little bit more complex for operators, but I think that this can really help in order to allowing more people, more commuters to use the bikes, not only for leisure, which is, as we were saying, good, but more and more for commuting.
You're bringing up a really interesting point, and I think a very important point, and that's like bringing the micromobility to where people live. I think it's fabulous. You obviously need to have it at the stations, right? The hubs, the public transit, the whatever you call them, mobility hubs, the big hubs. You need to co-locate them. But if you forget the other side where people live, or as you say, those business parks, the big commercial areas, then people need to get from where they live to the closest stations. Now, if you're in Paris, that's very easy because the closest station is very close to you. But if you're, Vancouver actually has a great public transit system where if you live in the city, you're very likely to walk maybe 2 blocks to a bus stop. But still, you know, if you have to go further than that and there is nothing to get me there, then people, again, I think you increase the friction again, and it just becomes harder. And then it's a mental effort because now I need to figure out where the closest station is. And by that time, I'm like, let me just do what I always do, which is either, I don't know, use my own bike or use the car, which is obviously what we don't want. I'm going to close the poll because this one is really interesting. So you guys see it. I've been told that you see it because it's a third. So there's either no physical integration, no digital integration because I have to download multiple apps, or no commercial integration. It's literally like we have an even split, which basically just tells me we haven't solved any of them perfectly. We still need to work on all three. and maybe let's dive into kind of this commercial integration. Cornelius, you started talking about that and this whole like, how do you bundle and what's the right thing? I know that when we poll people, and this is again this study from the university, they poll people again, and people were like, yes, I totally would probably buy a bundled pass, whether that's a 1 day or multi-day. I also know that a lot of the mass providers that have offered bundle passes don't see the adoption. So how do we get people from like, they say they want it to actually then buying it? Like, what are we missing here?
Maybe I jump first on that question. So I think the success factor is if people do not have to pay additional to it. So it is included for everyone in the tariff. Either you use it or you don't use it. It's kind of included. Well, with bike sharing, it's easier than I assume with scooters or electric bike, where you have to hire like the charging costs. Or with car sharing, not impossible, like apart from you need to limit it because of the variable costs for fueling, etc. So, but with bike sharing, you know, like you have like the fixed cost, and if people use the bike or not, you know, like it's not like a variable costs are that high. So that means it's easy to offer like flat rates and integrate them into the public transportation. Like free of charge for customers, and this is what the success like also in Stuttgart is, and also well the city of Hamburg they said like, hey, bike sharing should be free for everyone. It's like you do not need to bundle it, you know, like it's because it's for free for everyone, and you only pay like €5 a year for it.
That is great. I know that from a commercial perspective, that works if you offer kind of everything in one hand. So Nicholas, I'm going to throw this one back to you because I'm pretty sure you may have a bit of a different idea of what works.
No, for sure, if it's free, yes. And I think you're making a great point for mechanical bikes. When it comes to electric vehicles, so e-scooters and e-bikes, we've seen two things that two trends, right? The number one is that it's true that what we've observed is that a lot of people today on their commuting need to choose, right? So it's either public transport, it's micromobility, or it's your personal car. And then so there is specifically in France, where I'm sitting in, a big program from the government to incentive people to choose either public transport, micromobility, or both instead of cars. And those programs can actually be a way to make the economical equation work better. So that's on the company side of things, and not so much on the public sector side of things. That's one, and that's called the forfait, so the mobility subsidy in France. The second thing is partnership like we have in Lyon, where we're providing a discount to people that have a public transport pass. And we have seen that kind of really getting new riders to try our service, right? So they would have the incentive to try, and they find a use case. So probably they use us on the leisure time, as you've mentioned. We have a big portion of leisure, but also they pick and choose some days specifically when the weather allows it or when their agenda allows it to use us. So we don't see an actual real commuting exactly every day, but an occasional commuting use from the service thanks to the discount and the incentive that we're providing. So indeed, the commercial aspect and this level of integration on top of the availability is really crucial to improve the adoption.
And I think you're highlighting something very important. It's this like spontaneous on demand, like if it fits. Yeah. And I'm going to go back to my operations experience on the car sharing side, on-demand car sharing. One of the things that happened is like people would run late. And then, waiting for the bus or public transit wasn't convenient because they had to get somewhere. So that's when they used it. And I'm not suggesting that that's the same, but I could imagine because micromobility, most of it is on demand, right? It's like when and if I need it. And so if my plans change, it's a really great way. So maybe what I'm trying to say is like, maybe I don't want to commute every day with it, but you're allowing me to stay within the ecosystem of shared mobility when things do change, which I think is super powerful. Gaetano, I did want to kind of ask you around, especially what Nicholas just started talking about, this kind of mobility allowance or mobility budget, because it's becoming increasingly a topic, especially also from an employer perspective, to offer as a added benefit, right? Instead of a company car, which we don't want anymore or shouldn't have anymore, like some sort of other option. So what have you seen? Because obviously on the tech side, you really need to be ready for that type of offering to allow it.
Okay, so let me say, I would like to, saying that there is, in this moment, I think, a huge opportunity for micromobility operators, because, if you compare the government investment in car electrification or in public transport, they are really huge, while there is very low investment in micromobility, so public investment. So let me say, I think that increasing the public investment in micromobility can allow, let me say, to get, so to really making micromobility public service. So having the service, the best will be for free, as Cornelius was saying, but at least at an acceptable fare. So this will really, from our perspective, increase the adoption. To answer more directly to your question, yes, we see, let me say, e-bike not only being offered as public bike sharing, but also for employees or for apartments bike sharing. So we are having multiple requests from very different kind of customers, as I was saying. So a lot of residents are contacting us because they want to build private bike sharing, or big companies want to have private bike sharing. So let me say, from a technological perspective, of course, we try to be as much flexible as possible in order for allowing not only public bike sharing, but also creating a more closed environment for this kind of applications.
Yeah, and I think obviously then stitching that back together into like an overarching offering of a city, that makes it more powerful, right? I have something as a resident, plus I have something as a public user. I do see that we have a number of questions that have poured in, or at least two, and I did want to pick up on one specifically for starters, and that's, we talked about infrastructure and co-locating. Now, one of the other pieces with infrastructure that obviously helps people using more micromobility for all sorts of reasons is infrastructure, bike infrastructure, safe infrastructure to ride on. I'm bringing this up because, and as you said, Nicholas, you know, the spread of like how much leisure is different in different cities, but I can tell you in cities, and I'm using North America now as an example, in cities where bike infrastructure is poor, predominantly leisure trips happen because there will be some sort of leisure, you know, bike lane, scenic route. And so then it's used only for that. So I think it's a very good point. What can we do, or how? This is obviously a hard one because you need another partner in the mix. How can we increase or work on this build out of the infrastructure, you know, parking station, bike lanes, etc.? And it's an open question to the round. So whoever wants to go first has any thoughts?
Well, it's well, the easy question, like the easy answer is you need time and you need money from a city perspective to build it. When you look at Copenhagen, you know, they started in 1970, you know, Amsterdam, and now they are 50 years later, like at the top, very top, regarding the model split of bike usage. So as you said, you need a safe infrastructure on the one hand, the bike lanes, and then you need safe infrastructure where you can lock your bikes. And when you know, like commute, you're living in the suburbs and want to commute to the city to work, you need the safe bike racks at the train stations. And then when you arrive by train in the city or at your destination, then you need availability with micromobility. Then this is where then bike sharing come into place. And so then on the one hand, for the commuters, commute by train to the city, to the destination, and for the last mile, having then the micromobility solution. And within the city, if the usually, I would say average like 3 to 5 kilometers, that's easy. You commute and take your bike. When it's getting longer distance or when it's starting to rain, this is when you need like a public transportation and maybe like having then for the last mile then the bike sharing system to use. And like for the longer trips and when it's the weather is not that good, then you need a really good public transportation system to cover your trips. And so that these are my thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think so the first thing to me is really political willingness, right? So the city must want to actually shift to bikes, and we're clearly seeing this world movement that is not going to stop. So this is I'm confident that we have momentum. One thing to share, which we are currently doing, which is kind of an original way of building infrastructure. So currently in Grenoble, so center of France, we're building as an operator. So Dott is building 500 micromobility parking spots. So we are painting it on the floor with the authorization. We've made the analysis of where they should be to truly meet demand, where they are not, where they're creating sense for the combination with public transport and for usage. And how do we make that investment, which is significant, right? Well, we're going to have, we had a tendering process, and the fact that we have an authorization to actually have a service for 2-3 years allows us to make that investment. So it is a way for the city to get that infrastructure and the service for the citizens.
I see, Gaetano, that you unmuted as well, so I'm assuming maybe you have something to add.
Yeah, I mean, so I fully agree with Nicholas and Cornelius. So time, money, of course, willingness of the cities of building such infrastructures. I can bring the example of, let me say, Italy. Let me say, after COVID, I've seen more and more political willingness in creating such infrastructures. Milan is going to, let me say, is guiding Italy in this, but I see also smaller city like our city Bari is developing more and more physical infrastructure for micromobility. So I think that this will growing, and this is really a key aspect for really having micromobility as part of public transport.
Sorry, there we go. I think the combination of, you know, like willingness of cities, operators working together is what will move the needle. And I think one of you said it'll take time, so it'll also take patience, which on the user side we often don't have, right? When we want to use it, we want to have it now. The people that have to quote unquote give up, which is generally the car drivers, they'd rather not have this. So I think this courage on municipal staff is probably key. And I'm going to share a funny example, because I know City of Vancouver surprisingly has a wonderfully extensive AAA, so for all ages and abilities, bike share network, which basically in most cases means they're separated from the public, from the car lanes, like by bollards or planters or something. So you feel very safe. I can bring my daughter and she'll be fine biking on them. And I remember the first of these bike lanes they installed 12 years ago when I just started with Car2Go. And they installed it on one of the bridges. And because it was so political, they installed it in the middle of the night. So the construction crew came out at 2 a.m. in the morning because they figured nobody would get up at 2 in the morning to basically protest and block the bridge. And nobody did. So by 8 in the morning, the bike lane was in. And, you know, the whole car population was all mad, but the bike lane was in by that time. So just to show, like, I think it's a real issue, especially in like cities that are maybe a little bit lagging when it comes to that kind of infrastructure. We do have one other question, and I realize we're getting close to time. So maybe we'll use that one, and I'm going to reframe it a little bit. So the question is around, you know, people abusing the systems in some ways or forms. And I think I want to reframe it under, this is the typical tragedy of the commons, right? Common good that nobody feels real ownership over it. So then, and I think it's also very culturally different of how people treat these common goods. So maybe on that one, just what can be done? Because I think public transit has a lot of experience, Cornelius, right, with dealing with this tragedy of the commons problem. And how can we maybe use some of those learnings with the new forms of micromobility and incorporate that?
Well, you mentioned like the vandalism is really an issue that we have with micromobility, with bike sharing. And this is also, depending on a few cities, you have also waves of vandalism. So in that year, it's Hamburg. In the other year, it's Berlin. In the other year, it's Cologne that we are seeing in the different years. And then it's like usually the issue with youths, the young people that do not, either maybe it's fun for them. We saw it during COVID in Hamburg, in a few areas of Hamburg, they pure vandalism, you know, like they destroyed bikes. Then we recently saw it in Cologne and in Berlin. So this is really like the things that you do not want to see, but you see them. And And what is the answer here? On the one hand, you can make the bikes heavier, more like, resistant to vandalism. However, then they are heavier to cycle, and then also not attractive then anymore. And what we did is usually when we have this vandalism issues arising or coming up, on the one hand, we close the stations, we reduce our operation area immediately and get in contact with the police and also with schools. We make aware, we talk to the youth hey, what you are doing is a wrong thing, because we want to change, from the car to more bike usage to a nicer, more livable cities. So this actually also helps when you talk to the ones that are doing it. And but yeah, acceptance is, you need to deal on the one hand with the local authorities that the city itself, like police and that stuff, and I need to communicate that it's a good thing to have a bike sharing system in place. However, this is the downside of mobility.
So you're saying on the one hand, you just got to accept it. It's part of the package, and on the other hand, I actually like the fact that you pointed out education and awareness and showing how it actually supports a livable city, which is beneficial for everybody. Nicholas, I cut you off. I saw that you just unmuted, so I'm gonna shut up and listen.
No, I mean to echo what Cornelius was saying. What we have witnessed at Dott is drastic change, and with the other operators is the same on vandalism over the past few years. The number one thing that has drastically removed vandalism is when we have built stations for micromobility. So the end of free floating has completely changed the situation, because free floating is obstructing non-users, and therefore you have tons of vandalism with free floating. The moment we've put restricted parking, the vandalism dropped extremely significantly. And today in Paris, which had huge rate of vandalism, there is nearly no vandalism at all. I was yesterday in the warehouse. We just don't have any more broken or very few broken vehicle. The second thing, and you are right, Cornelius, is changing the vehicle themselves, which happened at the same time as we were changing the infrastructure. So today, e-scooters and e-bikes are 30 kilo plus, which means that obviously they are heavier and so much more so for thieves and private usage. They are absolutely not adapted, which is why we have no more vehicles which are, or very few which are stolen. And they are very resistant, meaning that every single part that we make is not adaptable to a private vehicle. So taking parts of it wouldn't make any sense. And then on education, it's more the communication is more to show to. We've always opened our doors of warehouses to show the actual. We only have permanent employees that are very motivated to maintain our vehicles. We are fully integrated socially into our ecosystems. We make sure that any vehicle in the water is actually collected and we pay for it. So all the communication that we can say on the respect that we have on public space is helping, and on education, obviously, making sure that they understand that those are private vehicles and that there will be we will punish people who are misbehaving. So banning people and making sure we are tackling fraud in a very systematic way has also helped.
So Gaetano, any last thoughts from you on that one? And then I do want to quickly wrap up with your number one mobility wish. So all of you think and make it really short. We have only a few minutes left.
Okay, really fast. So let me see. On our perspective as a manufacturer, we try to. So this poses us a design challenge, because on one side we have to make a bike which is attractive and inclusive and easy to be ridden. On the other side, a bike which is really robust. So let me say, as a manufacturer, we try to merge this aspect in our design. On the other side, let me say, at an operational level, we sit really close with the companies we work with in order to find solution in case there is vandalism, find alternatives, work together with them in order to avoid as much as possible this, let me say, dark side of the story.
So, all right. Each of you gets like very short second to say your mobility wish for 2020, and really, obviously, something around integrating. What is your mobility wish? I do want to point out we posted all the resources in the chat. So for the people who haven't seen them, maybe check out the chat while we're closing this session. Cornelius.
Well, my wish is that after COVID, that demand for mobility increases to the same level as beforehand, and that people take care on our goods that are on the street.
Gaetano.
Yeah, let me say, my wish is that I want to see cities more and more investing with funds in micromobility in order to support operator to offer capillary and cheap ways of moving with micromobilities.
And Nicholas.
My wish would be first a physical integration of micromobility and transport, because the rest will follow easily once we are physically inside.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us for the great discussion. It's been a pleasure hosting this. Thank you, Autonomy and Vaimo, for putting this on and hosting it. The Vaimo report is now tagged to the top of the chat, so please download it if you haven't. And with that, I wish you all a good evening. I'm starting my day now, so have a great rest, and I hope we meet in person sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Do we stay in?
I actually don't know. I'm hoping that somebody from Autonomy just closes it.
Maybe they are.
I don't know. They probably will.
I think they all left then. Yeah, okay. Cool. When did you leave Caligo? In which year was it?
2013.
And I joined end of 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now, you know what? I don't know. I have no idea if this got recorded now or not.
Me neither.
You neither? Okay, me neither. Because I'm like, I actually never saw a button come up. So
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a great conversation.
Yeah. Very thanks. Very good.
Good to see you again. Bye, Cornelius. Bye.
Am I back? God, this. Huh. Can you hear me?